Enzo opened them wide as if was savouring a delicacy. He immediately turned me round and inserted his tool into that place to finally finish me off. Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel Infidelity Stories. My name is Carla. I'm 41 years old, a doctor by profession. And up until recently, I thought I had everything I needed. I was married to Paolo, a successful businessman, and we had 2 children, ages 22 and 25, both of whom had already moved out. Our life was serene, luxurious even. Paolo provided me with every indulgence I could wish for. I had the best hair treatments, skincare and gym memberships, and even a personal trainer. Life should have been perfect, but something was missing. Deep down, I wasn't sure if all of these comforts were enough to make me feel truly alive. Years ago, I'd given up my career to become a full-time homemaker. I didn't hate my life, but I often wondered what had happened to the woman I used to. Paolo had consumed me, and my days had become a quiet routine of dinners and weekends at home. I was a picture of beauty, youth, and calm, but on the inside, I felt like I had let a part of myself wither away. Then, one sunny afternoon, something changed. I was invited to give a guest lecture at the university where I had once studied. It was a simple event, just me sharing my experiences with the next generation of medical students. The campus had changed so much since my time there, and I found myself wandering through the modern buildings, slightly disoriented, looking for the lecture hall. That's when I met him, Enzo. He was young, probably no older than 23, and his presence hit me like a jolt of electricity. He had short, neatly styled hair, a laid-back but confident air, and his athletic build was hard to miss in his tight jeans and white shirt. There was something about his easy charm that made it impossible not to stare. Too long. "I'm looking for the conference room," I replied, my voice faltering slightly. "Are you here for the lecture?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with excitement as I nodded. "Wait, you're Carla, the guest speaker?" I nodded again, and a warm, animated conversation quickly unfolded between us. Enzo was a second-year medical student, passionate about trauma surgery. As we talked, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't in years. For the first time in a long while, someone was seeing me. Not just Paolo's wife or the mother of 2 grown kids, but the doctor, the woman with her own career and dreams. I was caught off guard by how much I enjoyed talking to him, by how much it reminded me of the person I used to be. Days after that encounter, I couldn't get Enzo out of my mind. He had awakened something in me that I thought had long been buried. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Without thinking too much about it, I found myself going back to the university, hoping to see him again, and I met in one of the courtyards and spent hours talking. About medicine, about life, about things I hadn't shared with anyone in years. He was a gentleman, always making sure I was comfortable, offering drinks and snacks, and as the afternoon wore on, I realized just how much we had in common. But there was also something else, a tension, a pull between us that went beyond mere conversation. I could feel it in the way his eyes lingered on mine, in the way our hands brushed accidentally, sending sparks through my skin. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. This was wrong, wasn't it? But at the same time, it felt so right. We went to a nearby bar, one that was popular with students but quiet during the day. As the alcohol loosened our tongues, the conversations became more intimate, more personal. I found myself sharing things with Enzo I hadn't even told my husband. And then, as if on cue, the music in the bar shifted, something slow and sensual. And Enzo extended his hand to me. Back. But my body responded before my mind could catch up. The space between us disappeared as we moved together, our bodies pressed closer than they should have been. His breath was warm against my neck, and I could feel his desire, as palpable as my own. "Carla," he whispered in my ear, his voice low and intense. "Let me make you mine." My heart pounded in my chest as the weight of what was happening hit me. I thought about Paolo, about our children, about everything we had built together. I knew that what I was about to do was a betrayal of everything I had promised. But then I looked into Enzo's eyes, and in that moment, the pull was too strong to resist. We found ourselves in a motel, a place tucked away from prying eyes, and as soon as the door closed behind us, everything else faded away. Enzo's hands were all over me, urgent and desperate, and for the first time in years, I felt truly desired. His lips explored every inch of my body, and when he finally entered me, it was like a dam had burst. All the passion, all the frustration, all the longing. And as our bodies moved together, I found myself lost in the sensations, forgetting everything except the heat of the moment. I knew this was wrong, knew that I was crossing a line I could never uncross, but for the first time in so long, I felt alive. When it was over, we lay there for a while, our breaths mingling in the quiet. I knew that what I had done was a betrayal, but I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I felt free. For months, Enzo and I continued our affair, meeting in secret whenever we could. When he graduated, I even used my connections to help him land a job. The deal was simple. He would make me feel like a woman again, and I would help him succeed in his career. To this day, Paolo and my family have no idea. Maybe one day it will all come crashing down, but for now, I have no regrets. What do you think of my story? Do you agree with the choices I made? I know it was wrong, but at least for a little while, I felt alive again. Let me know your day. I was still Carla, the devoted wife and mother, the picture of respectability. But by night, when Paolo worked late or went on business trips, I transformed into someone else entirely. Enzo had become my escape, my passion, my secret. Each encounter with him felt like stepping into another world, one where I wasn't bound by the expectations of marriage or motherhood. But as exhilarating as it was, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of danger. Every text, every phone call with Enzo felt like a risk. I had learned to hide our conversations from Paolo, deleting messages and creating excuses for my absences. I told myself it was worth it. The thrill, the intensity, the feeling of being truly alive. It was worth the lies, wasn't it? Yet something in the pit of my stomach told me it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. There were close calls, moments when Paolo would come home unexpectedly, forcing me to scramble for an explanation. My heart would pound, my hands would shake, and for hours afterward, I would wonder how long I could keep this up. Envied. He didn't have a family to worry about, no husband to deceive. For him, it was all just part of the game, a thrilling adventure. But for me, the stakes were so much higher. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. Then one day, something happened that shook me to my core. I had met Enzo in the usual place, a small out-of-the-way motel where we knew we wouldn't be disturbed. We'd spent the afternoon wrapped in each other, lost in our usual passion. But as I was getting dressed to leave, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Paolo. "Where are you? I'm home early." I froze. My heart raced and panic coursed through me. I quickly grabbed my things, kissed Enzo goodbye, and rushed out of the motel, my mind spinning with excuses. But as I drove home, a dark thought loomed in the back of my mind. What if Paolo suspected something? What if this was the beginning of the end? "Hey," he said, his voice calm but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "Where have you been?" I was at the spa," I lied, forcing a smile. "I thought you were going to be late, so I took some time for myself." Paolo nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "The spa, huh? You've been going a lot lately." My heart pounded in my chest. Was that suspicion in his voice? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. "Well, I've just been feeling a bit stressed, you know. I needed a break." He didn't respond right away, just took a sip of his wine and leaned back in his chair, studying me. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I could feel the walls closing in, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I thought he knew. That he'd found out about Enzo and was just waiting for me to confess. But then he smiled, one of those weary smiles that barely touched his eyes. "Lived." I couldn't shake the feeling that the clock was ticking, that this fragile illusion of control I had built was starting to crumble. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety, with every look from Paolo, every question feeling like a trap. And then, as if sensing my tension, Enzo began pushing for more. He started talking about wanting to spend entire weekends together, away from the city. He was young, impulsive, and didn't understand the delicate balance I was trying to maintain. "I can't just leave, Enzo," I said one evening after we had met in secret. "Paolo would know. My kids might come by. It's too risky." "But Carla," he protested, his hand gently brushing my cheek. "We've been doing this for months. Don't you want more than just these stolen moments? Don't you want to feel like this all the time?" His words sent a shiver down my spine. A part of me did want that, to leave behind the suffocating marriage, the constant pretending, and live fully in the passion. Than just breaking a marriage, it would mean tearing apart my family, my stability, my entire world. "I can't," I whispered, feeling the weight of reality crash down on me. Enzo sighed, frustrated but understanding. He pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. "I just want you to be happy, Carla, whatever that means." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know what happiness looked like anymore. I was trapped between two lives, one filled with the safety and security of my family, and the other burning with the passion and excitement I had rediscovered with Enzo. And then, just as I thought I could keep juggling the two, the inevitable happened. One evening, as Paolo and I sat in the living room, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Without thinking, I reached for it, my heart stopping as I saw the name on the screen. I panicked, fumbling to hide the phone. "Oh, just a friend from the gym," I lied, my voice shaky, but it was too late. Paolo's expression changed, his brow furrowing as suspicion darkened his features. He reached for my phone before I could stop him. "Let me see." My heart stopped. I knew that in that moment, everything was about to fall apart. As Paolo reached for my phone, panic surged through my veins. I tried to remain calm, my mind racing for a way out of this. But it was too late. Paolo's hand closed around the phone and he stared at the screen. I held my breath, watching as the lines of confusion on his face slowly morphed into something darker. He swiped through the messages, reading the texts that had piled up between Enzo and me, and I saw the moment the realization hit him. His expression changed from shock to, "Who is he, Carla?" Paolo's voice was low, almost dangerous, as if he was holding back the full force of his anger. "Who the hell is Enzo?" I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The world around me blurred, my pulse thundering in my ears. All the lies I had spun, the careful deception I had maintained for months, were unraveling before my eyes. "Answer me." Paolo's voice was louder now, filled with hurt and rage. I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me, and met his gaze. My throat was dry, and the words I needed refused to come. I knew there was no easy way out of this. The truth was out in the open now, and no amount of backtracking or excuses could undo it. I didn't mean for this to happen," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. Pacing back and forth. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, and now you're telling me you didn't mean for this to happen?" The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. There was no excuse for what I had done, no way to sugarcoat the betrayal. I had crossed a line, and now the damage was done. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words sounding hollow even to me. What good was an apology now, when the trust between us had been shattered? Paolo stopped pacing and turned to face me, his eyes full of pain. "Who is he, Carla? Some young guy you met at the gym? Or is it something more?" His voice broke slightly on the last word, as if he couldn't bear to hear the answer. "It's not what you think," I said, trying to find a way to explain the unexplainable. "It wasn't supposed to be anything serious. It just happened." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "It just happened?" You think that makes it? I couldn't meet his eyes. The guilt was crushing, and I felt a wave of nausea rise within me. I don't know what to say, Paolo, I admitted, my voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, you did, he snapped, his voice like ice. He clenched his fists as if struggling to control his emotions. You destroyed everything, Carla. Everything we built together, our family, our marriage. You threw it all away for… what? Some excitement? Some thrill? Tears finally spilled down my cheeks, and I wiped them away quickly, hating myself for the pain I had caused. It wasn't just that, I said, my voice trembling. I felt lost, Paolo, for years. I felt like I've been fading away, like I wasn't even myself anymore. And when I met him, I felt alive again. It's not an excuse, I know, but it's the truth. Paolo stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. For a moment, I thought he might say something, but instead, he turned and walked toward the door, handle, his back still to me. I need to think, he said, his voice distant. I can't be here right now, I need space. With that, he opened the door and walked out, leaving me standing there, alone in the silence. The house that had once felt so familiar now felt like a prison, every corner echoing with the weight of my mistake. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. I didn't need to see who it was to know, Enzo. The thought of him made my heart ache, but it was no longer with the same excitement as before. Now it was tainted with guilt, with the reality of the destruction I had caused. For the next few days, Paolo was gone. He didn't call, didn't text. The silence was unbearable, but I knew I had to give him time. Time to process what I had done. Time to decide what he wanted to do. Every hour that passed felt like an eternity, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had destroyed my marriage beyond repair, like a chain around my neck, pulling me deeper into a pit of regret and shame. I had told myself that I wasn't hurting anyone, that I could handle the secret, but now everything was spiraling out of control. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Paolo came home. He looked different, tired, distant, but also resolute. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same place where he had confronted me that night. The air between us was thick with unspoken tension, and I waited for him to speak. I've been thinking, he said, his voice calm but cold. I don't know if we can come back from this, Carla. I don't know if I can forgive you. His words pierced my heart, but I knew they were coming. Paolo, Let me finish, he said, holding up a hand. I've thought about it from every angle. I've thought about the years we've spent together, about our children, about everything we've built. And I've decided. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in. I'll end it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll end it with Enzo. Paolo nodded, but his expression didn't soften. This isn't going to be easy, Carla. Things will never be the same between us, but I'm willing to try for the sake of our family. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I nodded. I knew that I had been given a second chance, but I also knew that the road ahead would be long and painful. Ending things with Enzo would hurt, but I couldn't afford to lose Paolo, not after everything we had been through. That night, I sent Enzo a message. I can't see you anymore. It's over. I'm sorry. The response came quickly, but I didn't read it. I couldn't. I turned off my phone and slipped it into the drawer, knowing that from this point on, I had to focus on repairing the damage I had caused. For the next several days, the house felt tense, almost suffocating. Paolo and I went through the motions of our daily lives, but everything had changed. There were no more late-night conversations, no more shared smiles. Instead, we moved around each other like strangers. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, watching, judging, but he didn't say much. The weight of what I had done hung between us, heavy and ever-present. Ending things with Enzo had left me feeling empty, but I knew it had to be done. He didn't take it well, of course. The messages came frequently at first, pleading, confused, angry, but I ignored them all. Each time my phone buzzed with his name, I forced myself to look away, to remind myself that I had made a choice, the only choice. I wanted to fix things with Paulo, but I wasn't sure where to start. He had said he was willing to try, but his silence made me wonder if that was still true. I could see the pain in his eyes, the betrayal etched into his every movement. And as much as I wanted to reach out to him, I didn't know. Sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the television. The soft glow of the screen flickered across his face, but I could tell he wasn't really watching it. His thoughts were elsewhere, somewhere far away from me. I took a deep breath and sat down next to him, unsure of what to say. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I spoke, my voice trembling slightly. "Paulo, I'm so sorry." He didn't look at me. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands tightened into fists on his lap. "I don't know how to make this right," I continued, my voice barely a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to fix us." Paulo let out a long breath, as if he had been holding it in for days. He turned to me then, his eyes filled with a mix of anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite place. "How?" he asked, sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the television. The soft glow of the screen flickered across his face, but I could tell he wasn't really watching it. His thoughts were elsewhere, somewhere far away from me. I took a deep breath and sat down next to him, unsure of what to say. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I spoke, my voice trembling slightly. "Paulo, I'm so sorry." He didn't look at me. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands tightened into fists on his lap. "I don't know how to make this right," I continued, my voice barely a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to fix us." Paulo let out a long breath as if he had been holding it in for days. He turned to me then, his eyes filled with a mix of anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite place. "How?" he asked. "I know," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "I know I did, and I hate myself for it. I hate what I've done to us. But I love you, Paulo. I love you, and I want to fight for our marriage." He looked at me for a long time, his gaze piercing. I could feel his anger, his hurt, and I knew that it wouldn't go away easily. But beneath all of that, there was something else, something that gave me hope. "Do you?" he asked quietly. "Do you really love me? Or are you just afraid of being alone?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had asked myself that same question more times than I could count in the past few weeks. But now, sitting here with him, seeing the pain in his eyes, I knew the answer. "I love you," I said, my voice firm despite the tears streaming down my face. "I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I've never stopped loving you. I lost sight of that for a while, but I see it now. I want to be with you, Paulo. I want to rebuild what..." Slightly, and he leaned back against the couch, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Carla," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if things will ever be the same." "I understand," I said quietly. "And I'm not expecting things to go back to the way they were overnight. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything." He didn't say anything for a long time, just sat there staring at the floor. I could see the war going on inside him, the battle between wanting to hold on to what we had and the pain of my betrayal. Finally, he spoke. "I think we should go to counselling," he said softly, still not meeting my eyes. "Together. Maybe we can figure this out." Relief flooded through me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. "I'll do it," I said quickly, eager to seize onto anything that might help us. "I'll do whatever it takes." Would be a long road, and there were no guarantees. But the fact that he was willing to try, that he was still here, gave me hope. The days that followed were quiet, but different. Paolo and I barely spoke, but we made an appointment for marriage counseling. It felt strange, sitting across from each other in silence, knowing that our lives were hanging in the balance. The tension between us was thick, but underneath it all, there was a small, flickering flame of possibility. On the morning of our first counseling session, I woke up early, my stomach twisted in knots. Paolo was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window. I watched him for a moment, the man I had loved for so many years, and I realized just how much I stood to lose. He looked up as I entered the room, and for a brief second, our eyes met. There was still pain there, still distance, but there was also something else, a faint glimmer of the man I had married, the man who had loved me despite. I nodded, my heart pounding. Yeah, I'm ready. As we walked out the door, side by side but still miles apart, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had a long way to go, and there was no guarantee that we would make it. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a chance. A chance to rebuild, to heal, and maybe, just maybe, to find our way back to each other. Only time would tell. Before you leave, remember to subscribe to the channel by activating the Tinkerbell to receive notification every time.